This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India-UK bilateral relations. The participants are Bhashwati Mukherjee, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist.
Rishi Sunak, who traces his ancestry to India, has become Britain's first ever person of colour to become Prime Minister. He was invited by King Charles III on Tuesday to head the British government. Mr. Sunak has many firsts to his credit as he breaks perhaps the ultimate glass ceiling, taking over as Prime Minister of a nation that once ruled over India, which was the jewel in its crown as the British Empire. He is the youngest British Prime Minister in over 2 centuries and the first non-Christian to hold that position. Mr. Sunak is a practicing Hindu. India has warmly greeted news of his elevation to the premiership of Great Britain and particularly hopes that there might now be forward movement on the free trade agreement between the two countries. Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee joins us this evening to explain what Mr. Sunak's premiership could mean for the bilateral relationship and hopefully for the stabilization of the global economy. Good evening, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Good evening, Nilova.
Why is Mr. Rishi Sunak's elevation to the premiership of Britain important, and what does it mean beyond the symbolism in real terms for both Britain and for India and the bilateral partnership?
His elevation, in my perspective, is very rich in symbolism because let us not forget that India has traveled a long journey from 1757, Battle of Plassey, to a couple of days ago in October 2022, when somebody of Indian origin has moved into 10 Downing Street. Moreover, let us not forget that if the empire was good news for the white inhabitants of the United Kingdom, the empire brought tragedy, Jallianwala Bagh, the Great Bengal Famine, where 3 million died, and many other things, including the loss of the Kohinoor, to India. And finally, in 47, left India bleeding and partitioned. The symbol is very rich, but it is not just the symbol we should think of, but also what it means in real terms. He is not the first non-Christian because Disraeli was a Jew, but he is the first non-white, and indeed that is very symbolic, particularly for the Conservative Party, which had always been regarded as the bastion of conservatism. But why was he selected by an overwhelmingly white majority Conservative Party MPs is because clearly England has moved away from the colonial hang-up into a large extent and looks to Rishi to bring that steady hand on the economy which the United Kingdom so badly needs after Brexit, which has not gone well for the economy, the effect of the pandemic, and the effect of the unilateral sanctions on Russia after the Ukraine-Russia conflict. All this has that Britain is on the cusp of a recession, and it's generally felt that Rishi Sunak has all qualifications, professional qualifications, regardless of the color of his skin or where he comes from, to put the UK back on track. That again is not symbolic, it's substantive. And that again is very important that a person of Indian origin commands the confidence of the Conservative Party to put Britain back on track. So I would say both are very rich. The symbolism is very rich, but the substance is even more important.
Mr. Sunak's rise, as you correctly pointed out, also makes a very strong statement about the quality of the Indian diaspora worldwide, which is increasingly visible in top leadership positions in countries across the globe, politically as well as in every major sphere. Mr. Sunak himself has attributed his rise to the emphasis his parents laid on education. And so what exactly does this say about the Indian diaspora? Is it because, why is it that they can rise to these kinds of leadership positions and do so well globally?
Absolutely. Our Indian diaspora actually are an example of how they have seamlessly adopted the country, their new country of adoption, how they have been able to blend with the social customs while at the same time keeping up the traditions which they learned as Indians, hard work, honesty, integrity, education, family values. In the case of Mr. Rishi Sunak, he was brought up on Sanatan Dharma. He had a simple upbringing. And he and his wife, although they are both very, very rich, would like the same for their own children. These are Indian values which the diaspora has brought to every corner of the world where they are diaspora. And the Indian diaspora today, the second largest, I'm told, after China, is one of the diasporas which have never attracted any adverse comment at all, because they work very hard, they climb up, they have excellent academic and professional qualifications, and they bring a lot of profit to their new countries, which is why, for instance, in the UK, the Indian diaspora is today very powerful, and Rishi Sunak himself is a proud representative of the Indian diaspora. His grandparents immigrated from undivided India, Punjab, and then thereafter made their way into the UK, and he's born a British citizen. But no doubt, he comes with all the richness of India's culture and civilization, and that is going to hold him in good stead in the months and years to follow.
Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has called Mr. Sunak a living bridge between our two countries. Now, how do you believe, is it going to afford the bilateral relationship any special benefits, do you feel?
I think that the bridge between the two countries, which is so appropriate and what our Prime Minister has said, is to show that Mother India remains interconnected with her children. The diaspora are the children of Mother India. Many of them went as indentured labor and then rose to leadership positions all over the world, or in United Kingdom, where they have really made an impact. So I think the bridge is the bridge between the two countries. Then the bridge is the bridge between India's children and Mother India. As far as Rishi Sunak is concerned, I think it is important to acknowledge that he has been selected by the British as the best British citizen to lead Britain. We respect that. We expect him to do his best for Britain. Britain would come first for him. But there is no doubt that it would give a huge boost to the bilateral relationship precisely because of who he is and where he comes from. There's no doubt about it. And the first test would be whether this famous India-UK FTA, which got delayed unfortunately because of the change in prime ministerships, etc. It was supposed to be ready by Diwali. Whether it will be ready by the end of this year, that itself would be a great boost to the bilateral relationship, the FTA.
Mr. Sunak had his first cabinet meeting today, and they've decided to put off the British kind of mini budget and announcement of economic policy till the 17th of November. So I would assume also, therefore, that the India-UK bilateral free trade agreement also gets marginally delayed. The fact that he's brought Suella Braverman back as the Home Secretary for Britain, do you think that, given some what unfortunate comments she made recently, do you think that that might sort of be a little bit a small hurdle perhaps in the relationship, or do you think that now things will be moving a lot smoother?
I don't think it will be a hurdle because, for one thing, she will be much more careful in her public utterances. She has been brought in by the new Prime Minister because she is close to the right-wing conservative fringe of the Conservative Party. He has brought in a junior minister for immigration. So immigration has been taken away from her. The minister is going to handle immigration and immigration issues. And the FTA is at an advanced stage of negotiation between the Ministry of Trade and Commerce of the two countries. So the Home Secretary of UK has no role to play. As far as the Mobility Pact is concerned, on which she made some rather unpleasant remarks, off the cuff I do hope, this has really no impact because the British side is very well aware that you cannot have a free trade agreement with an economy of India's size, which has overtaken the UK and the United Kingdom, without the freedom of travel between the two countries. So that's something which is also a WTO obligation. I don't think that the UK Home Secretary will be able to hold that up at all. In fact, it was almost ready to go. So what he has postponed till 17th of November are internal issues relating to how to kickstart the British economy, etc.
How do you think both countries would particularly benefit from this particular FTA? Of course, as you said, Britain stands to gain perhaps more than even India. But the fact that Britain is a P5 country, and how will this FTA really move things along in terms of, would it particularly help investments or services? Where effect provides the most visible effects?
One of the impediments to the FTA in the first instance was the fact that both Britain and India are service economies. That's our strength. And that is exactly why the British negotiators were reluctant to give any space on services. That's been sorted out. India is one of the largest investors in UK, and Indians own more real estate today in London than any other foreign community. Moreover, we've taken over some very well-known British brands. But what we can benefit from the UK are in those niche areas of technical expertise as well as on defense production, etc., where we see a very promising collaboration with them. Their being a P5 country has meant that we have a strategic partnership with them. They have endorsed our candidature for permanent membership. So all that flows from P5. But the FTA would actually result in greater wealth and prosperity for both countries, much more for UK actually than for India, but also for India, and it would result in niche technology flowing into India, which would help us, for instance, in our quest to become independent in semiconductors, in the Prime Minister's repeated injunctions that India should now start producing for itself, for defense equipment, etc., be self-sufficient, Atmanirbhar Bharat, all that will be facilitated by the FTA. So the FTA is also very important to India. There's no doubt about it.
So the FTA will include a very large component of defense production and defense collaboration, right? Because that has been one of Britain's strengths over the years, and it's an area that we are looking to particularly enhance our capabilities in.
Yes, their R&D is very good, and we are developing our R&D, and we are now actually going into our own defense production. And of course, it would be helpful to have the British on board, which they said they are. And there are many other ways in which we can, for instance, share our expertise, for instance, in third countries, Africa, for instance. And there are many, many ways in which we can collaborate. Once these artificial trade barriers are removed, the two countries can move ahead together. And I'm confident that if not by the end of the year, by very early next year, I think it was almost ready for Diwali actually. So nothing to stop us from doing it, let's say by 26th January next year for our Republic Day.
You've been involved in a lot of the negotiations for free trade agreements with major European countries and with the European Union. So is it different, or are there large elements that are similar to the standard format of a free trade agreement?
When we were negotiating the India-EU FTA, it's called the BTIA actually, one of the impediments actually, ironically, was the UK, because the UK did not want the European Union to make concessions on services because they are a service-strong economy like India. Nor did they want any concessions on mobility because of the concerns which Ms. Braverman rather undiplomatically articulated. So their departure from the EU has facilitated and kick-started negotiations on the India-EU BTIA, which is very ironical. At the same time, what held them up in EU has now been removed bilaterally because they no longer have the protection of the European Union. They need to have the FTA. So they are ready to make concessions which they were not ready to do when they were negotiating with India as a bloc. Now that they are negotiating bilaterally, they cannot hide behind the bloc. They have to accept they are a service economy, we are a service economy. There has to be give and take on both sides. Why should just India give? India will give if Britain gives. It's a give and take. It has to be, the FTA has to be on equal terms. And that, in fact, was earlier a problem when the Indian economy was not so big. But now that we've opened the British economy, it's now much easier to get the FTA done on a basis of sovereign equality. It has to be on the basis of sovereign equality.
It sounds fairly positive, and I think we can look forward to interesting times with Mr. Sunak's assumption of the premiership of Great Britain. Thank you very much. We've run right out of time. Thank you so much, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Thank you so much.
You are listening to a discussion on India-UK bilateral relations. The participants were Bhashwati Mukherjee, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.